everyone to today's episode of Just Joshing. I am your host, Joshua Pentalaresco. I write stuff and podcast too, and today I have a first for this podcast. I talked to two authors at the same time, Craig Dilouie and Chris Mars. I'm kind of unsure how I'm going to put them both together on the main blog. Hopefully, I figure this out before I post it. If not, I'm gonna maybe cry a little. No, it's not a big deal. They both are really talented and both their works deserve to be mentioned. So, I think I'm gonna probably highlight Chris and then really focus on Craig on the interview, or maybe I'll do it the other way around. I don't know. I'll figure it out. I think somewhere. Anyway, no, they were great. The only kind of surprise about the thing from my end was I actually expected Chris to initially be more vocal than Craig. I don't know why I had that impression, but that was the one I had, and I was completely wrong. Craig was really, really loose, and Chris was awesome when she talked. It just took her a little while to get into it. Next time, I'm hoping when I do have her on the show, I get to talk to her more. That's kind of my secret hope. So, Chris, if you are listening to this, yes, next time I'm starting with you, just so you know. Fair warning. Anyway, well, I got a lot I can talk about. I'm not going to go, I had something really big about honesty. I think I'm going to put that aside for another podcast. I just kind of going to talk about some of the professional stuff going on in my life right now. I am currently represented by Creative Edge, and Creative Edge is a publicity company. Mickey Mickelson, I should say. I'm sure you'll just punch me for that one, but that's okay. Mickey Mickelson is the run, and so coming up in the fall, I'll be promoting my own books locally for sure. You're going to see me in Calgary. You're going to see me in Edmonton doing some things. I'm hoping I made some arrangements so I can go back and see my books a little, even if it's just a one-off signing in Windsor, London, Ontario. I'm hoping maybe do some stuff for schools. I can talk about what you want to be when you grow up, because I think I think I'm going to talk about that one today. I hate the idea of realistic, the word, and the reason I kind of hate it is because that's usually the one droned on when you go through the process, and because school is a process. Don't get me wrong, everybody should go to school. Everybody should be taking classes. Everybody should learn. Learning is very, very important. But my thing, and I mentioned this in interviews, I'm just going in great detail here. My thing about school today is a couple things. The world that school was built for is coming apart bit by bit. I'm looking what's going on in my day job. I'm looking what's going on in other jobs right now in Alberta, and I'm watching the thing shrink. And even though I know that some of this is going to come back when Alberta goes through this cycle, I also know some of it's just going away and not ever coming back, because the system's changing, and how we do business, how we interact with each other, it has been changing as well. And the issues today that are grossly ignored by the current establishments are going to have to be confronted by everybody else. So I kind of look at school, and the other thing I look at school with too is the cost. This is just strictly a money thing. I just think it makes no sense to take the next generation who's supposed to be better than you and give them a bad start of indentured servitude. I mean, schools aren't cheap. You're looking at $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 for anything really good, maybe more, especially if you're going for a master's or a PhD, and going into indentured servitude. Don't get me wrong. It's not, again, this has nothing to do with the whole concept of learning. I really want people to know what they're doing when they're calculating, the right schematics to put a foundation in a building. I really, really do. And I'm not saying the knowledge in itself is the issue. It's the cost. The cost is not balanced for anybody. It's kind of like, to me, it's like this. Instead of earning a living for your job, now you're indentured to your job before you even get started. It's one thing when you make your own decisions. Like, you buy a house, and if you choose to buy a house, for example, alright, housing by and large is overpriced right now. Just my opinion, just the way it is. But it's your choice. If you decide you really, really want a house, no one's going to stop you. Really, really want, really, really go get it. Just the way it is. But, say, pardon me as I drank some Gatorade there. But if it would be much better in somehow, some way to make it so that if people can acquire these skills easier. I would rather live in a world where I am forced to retrain to keep up with what's coming up. And it's accessible for me to retrain as it is for them to learn. Because then, now the best people are doing the best things, ideally. There's still going to be, it's not completely how the world will ever work, but I would rather that. So I hate, but usually this goes back to realistic real quick. So when you're pursuing whatever you're pursuing, right? A lot of people are told you can't get this. You have to be realistic with your goals. You have to do this, that, and the other thing. And it's not about being realistic with your goals. Who cares what your goals are in the sense of how big or the scope? I hope they're huge. You don't need to. Your journey, whatever you choose to do, whether it's writing, acting, whether it's boxing, whether it's human resources, it really doesn't matter. Your journey never stops, no matter what you decide to do. Like, I never expected to do a podcast. Here I am doing a podcast. I never planned it. I've done video stuff. I've done comic stuff. I've done lots of other things. All in all, like I'm going where I want to go. I didn't accept realistic. I said I could make this work, and slowly but surely, I'm making this work. So seems like a legit thing to me. All right. So in other news, I got a comic series I'm finishing this weekend too. So I'm going to head right into the podcast from here. Craig Dilouie, Chris Mars. I'm sorry, Chris. Don't hurt me. I hope you guys are in for a treat. One thing I would note before we begin, the interview took place in a restaurant with a really open window, so sometimes you hear traffic coming in. We stopped talking, let the traffic kind of play out, but you might hear some odd sounds here and there, just so you know that's where it was from. Alright, we'll be back right after this. Tired of buying t-shirts, coffee cups, and other memorabilia that all podcasts seem to have? I sincerely hope not, because I'm jumping aboard this gravy train right now. That's right. You can be the proud owner of a Just Joshing t-shirt, photographic print, and coffee cup at my Redbubble store. Redbubble has one-click ordering and will ship anywhere in North America. Check out http://worldwideweb.redbubble.com/people/jpenteloresco for more details.
You got a crush on this? No, I didn't see it. Yeah. But, okay, I'm officially on, so but I don't like what you say in terms of anything profane, but there's anything you don't want to talk about, just, now's the time to know. She's laughing because she's like, whatever. So, alright, so I am with Chris Mars and Craig Dilouie, the dynamic duo Calgary local writing scene. How you guys doing?
Good, thanks.
Good. Yes, alright, so, who do I begin with, Chris or Craig?
Chris.
Oh, she just points right at Craig.
All right.
So I won't really him just go to you, but that's all right. So Craig, you have written I remember reading the musketeer style kind of thing you got to read. I can't remember what it's called off the top of my head, but I still remember how you read that, and that was fantastic.
Yeah, The Alchemist.
The Alchemist. That was really well done.
Thank you.
Yeah. So. You got a background, it sounds like you have a background used to being in front of public. Is that something you have a lot of experience with? And I'm sorry for being as nervous.
Oh, for being in front of the public?
Yeah.
No, not at all.
Wow.
In fact, I'd say this whole idea of the writer being this super engaged marketing-wise with the public kind of person is a new animal. But my generation of writers, we would write and we would.
You got blonde? I'm gonna go quick here.
Yeah, my generation of writers, that just wasn't part of the game. Maybe at the end of it, you would do a book signings, and do some type of book tour. But you didn't really engage in the public, and the whole idea of doing public readings wasn't something that was on the top of a lot of people's minds. You were just writing. It was a very solitary pursuit. Nowadays, it's much more expected. People are a lot more engaged with the public through social media, but also in live events.
Well, just because of how things kind of changed. I remember I self-published a book, I want to say 12 years ago, like way back, just to see how it actually worked out. And back then, it was like people were looking at you kind of funny still that you were self-publishing. But now, with the way I think it's because of a combination of just social media, but also just the fact that there's such a sheer glut of books out there now. It's almost like you have to do more to stand apart from the pack.
Yeah, you do. Back when my zombie books were first published around 2010, they did very well. And one of the reasons why I think they did well is I did a lot of marketing because that's my day job. So I was able to bring a lot of those skills to and one of the great things that happened in publishing was the digital revolution, which democratized publishing itself. Anybody could now publish. And initially it brought in this whole slew of niche small presses that could serve a market really well in a way the big guys couldn't. And it also democratized marketing because some guy who I wouldn't have to do advertising in a magazine or try and get in the newspaper. I could, or do direct mail in some way. Those are all really expensive things to do. Instead, I could just get on Facebook. I could do this. I could do that. I could start a blog. And back then, that was considered pretty revolutionary. But now it's a staple. Everybody's doing it. And because everybody's doing it, and there's so much product out there, that's the price of democratization, right? Is everybody starts doing it. And when everybody starts doing it, there's a lot of product, and everybody's doing the marketing. It's really hard to stand up.
Well, yeah, no, that's just the way it is now. Now it's almost like when you look at it in terms of branding. Now it's just like this is just my own experience. You got to be yourself. Like that's really, you can either come up with this really outlandish persona, which literally will fall apart the moment you step out into the real world, or you're just yourself. You just let it all kind of hang out there and just be you. And like that's what I found has worked for me. I'm like literally, I mean, you see my Facebook or my Twitter feed. I mainly am a fan. I'm as much a fan as I am a writer, so I will promote other people's stuff because I like doing that. I that's part of who I am. I talk about my stuff, probably not enough. I find that's a really hard balance. Actually, I find just how do you not sound like a shill? Like you know what I mean?
Well, what I do with my blog is I have a horror blog where I review books, short films, movies. And it's a blog for genre enthusiasts, and it just so happens that it's by a guy who writes these books, and probably 1 out of 5 posts
we're all good for the time being. Yes, fair enough.
No idea what I'm saying.
Your blog.
Oh, so I do a blog where a horror industry blog. Let me start that over. So I do a blog that's a horror blog where I review movies, short films, books, and promote things that I like. And it's really a genre enthusiast blog that then pumps out to I have a newsletter, and then that pumps the posts automatically pump out to Facebook and to Twitter. And so what I'm really doing is just sharing my enthusiasm for the genre and feeding other people's enthusiasm for the genre. I just so happen to write those books as well. And so maybe 1 out of 5, 1 out of 10 posts is about my own work.
Yeah.
But if you go to my blog, it's not the Craig Dilouie show. It's really a blog about genre.
So what do you really like? What's your favorite stuff?
I like apocalyptic fiction is probably my favorite. At least in terms of the horror realm. I like stories that have tough ethical choices where the shit's hitting the fan, where there's a sense of zeitgeist, that 9/11 feeling permeating the whole world, and now the rules have changed. We're ordinary people, everything's changed, and now we have to try and survive.
Yeah, no, that's cool. So with your work in particular, since you do the horror stuff, who do you when you look kind of at your stats, like who are your influences? Are they in the genre or are they outside the genre?
Well, initially my influences were outside the genre because I didn't really find horror as sort of found me. I was just about ready to actually hang it up because I was so sick of the publishing game, the old traditional publishing game, that and my daughter had just been born, and I was just like, why am I spending all these hours on this? And then I wrote a zombie book on a lark, which was Custer's Last Stand with zombies, basically.
Awesome.
The first novel that was military versus zombies. And it was called Tooth and Nail, and it sold extremely well. And so I started reading a lot of zombie books because I was like, wow, I hit on something here, so I'm going to read zombie books because I'm writing zombie books. And so I wrote 2 more zombie books and even more after that. And so I read a lot of zombie books at the time. Probably my biggest influences at the time were Joe McKinney and David Moody. David Moody is a British author who was showing everybody how to do self-publishing. He was doing it with like PDFs back in the mid-noughties. But when the Kindle was just, glimmer in some tech engineer's eye. And he was selling his PDFs, and he had these zombie stories that were super realistic. Most of the people in the story who are the survivors are just curled up in a fetal ball on the floor, crapping themselves, which I'm like, yeah, I would do that too.
Yeah.
That's really realistic, and so I really enjoyed that. And so his stories are more about the true horror of zombies, not the wish fulfillment part. Like, yeah, I get to shoot zombies in the head and I don't have to pay taxes and I don't have credit card bills anymore. I can take what I want. That's more the wish fulfillment side. For me, I just really love the horror side. Like, oh God, I could lose everything. And as a middle-aged guy with a family that was a kind of resonated with me.
I mean, if something like that really happened, that is the natural reaction. It's like, why are everybody acting like this? Like, what's going on? That is totally normal. I mean, now I think there'd be some people kind of going with the opposed to like, oh, cool, zombies. I'm like,
yeah. He taught me to make it realistic. And another thing he taught me is if you're going to write a zombie story, make it about people with zombies, not about zombies with people. The characters come first, and you have to really care about these people.
Well, yeah, because, I mean, the zombie story right now in modern time is The Walking Dead. Like, and originally it was a comic series. It was really well done, and everybody now, like I said, there was definitely a pattern of trying to copy that. And the reason it works is nothing to do with the actual zombies. The zombies are there, but it's more with people. And I mean, I find that's true actually with any kind of foreign fiction. You have to, when you write something, the ideas in one sense are secondary. There has to be some kind of connection to the audience in some way. That's just, again, something I've learned. It took me a long time to learn that, but I learned it. So So let's see. You do zombies. Like I said, you have a certain sense of humor with your stuff.
Some of it depends on what I'm writing.
Yeah.
My zombie stuff is super dark. There might be little glimmers of humor because humor is a great way in horror to diffuse the tension.
Yeah.
To blow off a little bit of steam, and so horror and humor are kissing cousins in terms of genres, and so it's always good to have a little bit of humor. But for me, it's almost inadvertent. It's while I'm writing, I'm like, oh, that's kind of amusing. I put that in, but it's not so much for effect. But like with my fantasy stuff and my science fiction stuff, I like to put a lot of humor into it. It's just rip on it and have fun.
That's kind of what I feel like. It's almost like. I guess in your case, is it an evolution of like just you're more comfortable in your voice, or is it more like just how the story dictates?
Well, in my view, yes and no. In my view, the story determines the voice. So my generic voice, I guess I would call it, my general storytelling voice is evolving as I learn more and more about the craft and do this more and more and get a little bit better at it every time I finish something. But at the same time, I think that each story deserves its own voice. So when I wrote The Alchemist, which is a fantasy novel, it's historical fantasy. It had a comedic setup, and I riffed on it that way. And so the voice is a lot different than my zombie stuff, which is a lot darker, a lot crisper. The writing, but but it has evolved over the years. I was one of those writers who, read a lot of Stephen King and then tried to write like Stephen King. And I read a lot of Chuck Palahniuk and I tried to be Chuck Palahniuk. Like everybody, a lot of writers do that.
Yeah.
And then, well, you didn't do it.
I didn't do that, no.
Yeah.
No.
I didn't want to write. I always knew that I wanted to write my own voice.
Yeah, no, it took me longer to grow up than you did as a writer.
Oh, by the way, feel free to jump in at any point. You're both on the podcast.
Yeah, it's her turn.
Yeah.
Hit her with something.
No,
No, I just never done a podcast before, so I'm just sitting and...
No. Here's the thing. This is the thing. Listen, you listen to my last podcast, I had a serious conversation with Jane Bernard about Darkwing Duck.
There you go.
Yeah, there you go. So I
watched Darkwing Duck when I was a kid.
Yeah, I did too. Who didn't love that show? Well, maybe that guy, but that's okay. So that's not the point. But the thing is, I'm not interested. I'm not really interested in making you look bad in any way.
Oh no, I know. I just get really kind of shy.
I know, but okay. This is something like he pointed out earlier. We are no longer in one sense, it's cool to especially, you don't know me very well, I'm a stranger, blah, 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 and I get that, and it takes a lot of guts. I did an interview with a band last night, and the drummer was super, super nervous, and for me, it's kind of surreal, because it's like, I'm just, look at me, I mean, I don't know, but the thing is, so, what I'm trying to get across is, in your case, it's okay to just say hi and talk, because honestly, people will be drawn to that. And this is not just for the podcast, but for even when you go and do like convention shows, you just that kind of stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I come from a bit of a different background too with public speaking, because I used to be in the theater. So I'm used to having scripts and not having to riff off the top of my head, and I'm a really slow thinker when it comes that way. So I'd rather sit and listen.
No. It's fun, but you do stuff too. You do good stuff from what everybody tells me. I haven't read it yet, but at some point I'm going to pick up. I love the old flip style books. I really, really do. So I'm gonna. My personal favorite one is an old one it was Charles DeLint and Fritz Lieber. It took me forever to find it. And it was again, they did that old flip style. So
that's how Dean Koontz got his start.
Yeah.
It was late 60s. I can't remember who he was paired up with. And the story might have been close to a Stephen King novel named Eyes of the Dragon or Tears of the Dragon.
Eyes of the Dragon, yes.
It was Dean Koontz's novella that went with the Ace flip books. If I'm remembering right.
That's okay.
This information was told to me a long time ago.
It's okay. So no, I mean it's cool. So I'm just saying, feel free to speak up. He like I said, I actually would.
He's done a lot of panels.
No, I know. You can't afford to be. I mean, and I'm not trying to question the speaking. I hope you don't get this wrong idea.
Oh, just hit her with a direct question.
Yeah, okay.
Because I just sit and listen to him do his spiel.
Okay, well in that case, I'll do this. So what do you like to write? What do you write? What do you try to say?
What do I try to say?
Yes.
Ooh, that you hit me with a heavy question right away.
That's right, because I want to get you to talk.
Well, with horror, I always try to say that there's hope. No matter how dark it is, no matter what's going on, that there's always hope. It can get better. It doesn't always get better. Some of my stories end on a pretty down note, but then some of them end on a pretty up note.
Well, I'm of the mindset that inevitably tomorrow is better than yesterday. Now, sometimes that change, because change is painful, and I think that's why people are so resistant to change, is because you have to. Usually, that means you got to give something up, right? Not promote my stuff too much. My third book, in the Watcher series, deals with that concept. There's a big change that has to happen with actually that whole universe, and that's how I'm going to wrap things up for the time being. But the biggest thing I'm going to point out is it's uncomfortable. I mean, a lot of people aren't used to the idea that you want good things to happen, you have to give them up. You know what I mean? And that's why I think sometimes things seem bad, but if you go on over a longer period of time, right? Time heals, things heal, and that's just my
Yeah, sometimes the end of the book is actually the start of their life.
Yeah.
Because they've gone through their dark, they've either fought against it and won, or fought against it and lost. But no matter what, it's the start.
Yeah, it's the start. And I guess the only real constant is the fact that there's always a struggle. That's just how it is, because everything is always changing.
Yes, I write more like the psychological, maybe literary horror, would you say? Because I'm not into the. I like to read it, but I don't like to write it, like the slasher and that type of horror.
Do you know where I actually like that horror in particular? In films. You want to know why? Because there's someone that's actually been I've actually done a couple films. They're cheap to make. They are incredibly cheap to make, but they're fun. Like they're fun in a film setting, but in a literary setting, they're boring. Because cool, it's nice to get the description and get caught in that world. But I always preferred Alfred Hitchcock. I love the idea that the fact that the human imagination will always come up with something scarier than anything you can put on the page. So
yeah, my favorite monsters are the ones that you don't see.
Exactly.
The ones that like Stephen King's good at this, but then once he does show his monster 9 times out of 10, it's like, really? Like It is a good example.
It was it is interesting to me because just how I'm a big Dark Tower fan. I love the whole Dark Tower. That's not horror, but it is actually part of the Dark Tower in a tiny way.
Yes.
So I mean, it's a creepy book. I mean, it's a really creepy book.
But when he's Pennywise and all the others, he keeps the main monster off the page. But then once they go down into the tunnels and it's, I don't know if anybody's read it or not. You can edit this out. It's a giant spider. I'm not so mad.
No, I'm not editing this out. It's okay. I mean, look, it came out in 1987.
I know, but I still know a lot of people who want to read it who haven't yet.
That's okay. I will put on the intro to the podcast there are some spoilers.
There you go.
Okay, that's it.
So the spider is not precious.
Stephen King talked about 3 types of horror. There's horror, terror, and the gross out. Mm-hmm. And so the horror is like, oh my God, that's a spider the size of a dog. Mm-hmm. That's horror. The gross out is like a severed head bounces down the stairs and blood splatters. That's gross. Mm-hmm. It's a gross out. And then there's terror, which is more like the lights go out and you feel a hand brush your cheek, or you hear a child singing in this ghostly manner in the walls. And that's where you get that's where the chills come from terror. And he preferred terror. And that is, I think, the kind of horror fiction that I like, and I think that's kind of Chris likes as well.
I think in truth everybody likes that. It's just hard to do because you have to set it up in a way that people can buy into it, and that's a really and that because we're so skeptical today about everything, right? It's a hard sell, but once you have them, you got them.
And that's why you need good characters. Mm-hmm. And whether it's you need a story about people with zombies, not zombies with people. It's like it's the same people with X instead of X with people. It can be anything. Mm-hmm. But as long as you have a good characters, that's the stand-in for the reader. Mm-hmm. And then once they're immersed in the story, as the reader, as the main character themselves, mm-hmm. They or have more willing suspension of disbelief, and they'll run with whatever your premise is.
And to add to that, I was at Borderlands Boot Camp in 2008, and I can't remember if it was F. Paul Wilson or Thomas Monteleone in one of the critiquing sessions said that no matter how fantastical you make your world, as long as you believe it with 100% confidence, your reader will believe it. Because as you write it, you're writing down basically your belief, and you're confident that this world is actually there. I'm trying to remember the trick he said. Yeah, just write it as if this world already exists, and don't add any explanation.
Mm-hmm. No, actually, that's actually the best way to do it. I mean, the only time you need to actually put any kind of real explanation, I find, is if you're doing something like epic fantasy. And I get why, because there's just so many things to keep straight. I'm doing one right now, and it became one. I'm not sure how it happened. It just became one. And it's like, I've got to put notes down. This sucks. That's one part I really hate in fantasy books. At the end, you get to the end, you got all these notes about all this world and history. I don't want to do that because I think personally it ruins some of the magic of the story. and yet here I am. You know?
Well, if you look at Gotham City, did they really explain how that came about? No,
No.
it just was, and everybody believes it.
No, and Gotham works. Actually, I think Gotham is probably the true character in Batman. To be perfectly honest with you, did Batman come before Gotham, or did Gotham come before Batman? I think that actually would be an interesting story to tell at some point down the road. But yeah, it's just the way it goes. So I asked her. I'll ask you. What do you try to say when you write?
It depends what I'm writing. With my fantasy and science fiction stuff, which tends to be a little lighter and a little more fun, I'm just trying to tell people a good story and make them laugh.
Mm-hmm.
Although The Alchemist has a sort of a Bildungsroman theme of growing up, just as Europe was growing up in the Renaissance, so did these characters. Finding out what's important to you and fighting for that. So some what I would call lighter themes wrapped in humor. And then on the horror stuff, the themes get a lot heavier. I think good horror sounds corny, but there's the saying, good horror holds up the fractured mirror to the human soul. And I think there's really something to that, where you can learn something about yourself that maybe it's a little uncomfortable. So in my zombie fiction, the theme is generally the world's ending. You've lost everything. What is the difference between living and survival? Is it worth surviving if you have nothing to live for? And those books tend to be really dark, but they always end, as Chris was saying, it's good to have a note of hope. They always end on a note of hope. If not for the main characters, at least for the species. So, and that's important with apocalyptic fiction. If the world's going to end, you can brutalize your characters, you can kill a bunch of them, but you don't kill the species. Always give hope for the species. There has to be this sense that the sacrifices these people make in the present will ensure that the species has this better chance of survival long term. But my darkest book was Suffer the Children, which is it's essentially it's an apocalyptic vampire story about a disease that kills the world's children. They come back from the grave 3 days later to their grieving parents and ask for blood, and then they go into a death-like state again. The parents figure out if they give the kids blood to drink, the kids return to normal just as they were, but only for a short time. Then they die again, and then they need more blood, and then they need more blood. So the essential question is, how far would you go for your child to keep your child alive? The kids are the vampires in the book, but the monsters are the parents who now find themselves trapped, taking as much blood as they can out of themselves, and then they get it from friends and family, and then the only source left will be each other. And so as parents, we say, "Oh, I'd put my arm in a thresher for my kid," but would I put your arm in a thresher?
Yeah.
Would I put Chris's arm in a thresher? Would I put somebody else's arm in a thresher? That's where that you have this beautiful, pure love, the most beautiful, pure love in the universe, in my opinion, the love we have for our children, and it puts it on its head and makes us something evil, and it makes people uncomfortable. And that to me was probably my best horror work on the operating theme alone.
Well, no, just
for that reason.
Because the other thing too is the reason why I think that works so well is because it could happen. I'm not saying that particular scenario could happen, but that's a choice that every parent would make. Would look in the mirror and be like, okay, what's right here, right? And what am I willing to do for this? And that says a lot about not only the characters.
And some people say I would go part of the way. Some people say I would go all the way. Some people would say I would go none of the way. And morally, they would all be right.
Yeah, exactly. There's not exactly a right or a wrong answer here.
That's correct.
That's the whole point.
Right.
That's almost why, a different genre. We haven't talked about science fiction. That's why I like science fiction so much. Usually, really good science fiction has either two really good choices or more, or bad choices or more. And sometimes it's about what is the right answer for this particular,
I like grown-up fiction where everything is not morally clear, that there are moral ambiguities and you have to make tough ethical choices. What I like about horror and particularly apocalyptic fiction is it forces those ethical choices. You're going to have tons of those ethical choices.
Yeah.
And the old morality, which glued all our lives and society together, might not be there anymore, or will it be there, or will it change? It's all these little choices that define what the new age is going to be like,
and who we are as people. Like what are we willing to live with? What are we not willing to live with?
So for me, the willing suspension of disbelief should only come with the premise.
Yes.
All the world's children die. They need blood to survive. Go.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah.
And then if you can accept that, and like Chris said, you treat it matter of factly, and that's what it is. It's matter of fact. I didn't try and milk the gruesomeness. I didn't make the kids super creepy and funny and or evil. They're just kids, and they need blood to survive. Go.
Yeah.
And if you accept that premise, everything else in the book should feel natural. And that's what I aim for. And I hope I achieved it. But that's the way I think it should work.
Yeah. I gotta get you back in this. You've been away for a bit.
That's okay. I'm just listening.
He's actually a little amused if there's songs. But
yeah.
I'm amused.
Because I'm focusing. I'm actually I've done it on OK.
I'm laughing at myself.
Yeah.
Well, no, it's thanks. No, because every time I sit and I listen to whoever it is spiel off, I learn something new. So,
and there's nothing. There's absolutely nothing wrong with being a good listener. Absolutely not. I'm not. I'm just trying to make sure it's like you feel loved.
Oh, I feel the love.
You feel the love.
I feel the
love.
I just had nothing to contribute.
Oh, okay. So let's
hit her with a good one.
Okay. So okay.
When I'm tired. Hey.
I'm doing 2 books at once. I don't sleep right now either. It's okay. Yeah. So here's my question for you. You have the flip book.
Yes.
So what else do you have published right now?
I have my first novella through Bad Moon Books is Everything Leads Back to Alice. I have a short story coming out, The Frankenstein Experiment, with Rob Cohen and Christine Cohen.
Okay.
That was, we were all at the Stanley Hotel in Estes Park for a writer's retreat, and then we wrote stories, and they picked the top 13, and they're putting them into an anthology.
And that was the hotel
that Stephen King stayed at that inspired The Shining.
Awesome.
Yeah. And let's see, Library of the Dead, I have a story in. And that's, the Library of the Dead is the Crystal Cathedral? Down near San Francisco. Oakville.
Okay.
So we each wrote stories. The theme was people had to die and end up in it. What else have I got? I was in Dark Discovery's Femme Fatale issue. It was sort of like the new female.
Dark Fantastique?
Yeah, no, there's Dark Fantastique too, but Dark Discovery's the magazine.
Yep.
And Dark Fantastique by Jason Brock.
So
all short stories and novellas right now. I have a novella coming out probably this summer.
So you like a shorter format?
No. Single parent working full time. Shorter format is easier for me to do.
No, that's fair. So, you want to ask? What's your day job?
My day job was a bartender, and then I had a job lined up when I came to Calgary, but then the economy collapsed, so I've just been doing some freelance, I call it extreme beta reading, because it's editing, but it's not full, like, copy edit, all this. It's more content editing. Your characters need this, or your plot has a hole here, and that kind of stuff.
Oh, okay, cool. I might talk to you when this is over, actually.
Okay.
No, I don't get it. I don't know. So you want to do long? So when you have time, do you want to do like a bigger, longer form?
Yes, I would want to do a novel. I've got one. I'm a pantser, not a plotter. So I have one kind of notes jotted down.
No, I mean I'm naturally a pantser. The only thing I actually kind of plot like in my head, I always have an ending in mind. I have a beginning. I kind of just let it go. Because I've done the planning thing, and what I've noticed is. My characters go, silly Josh, we're not going there.
Yeah.
They'll do their own thing.
Yeah, that's so I find
I'm a plotter though.
I like with my third book, I plotted it more. Like the third one because I know where I want to do something else. I don't want to actually get to the point where I'm just milking the same thing over and over and over again. I think 3 is a good, nice number to go. I've done my thing. Let's do something else for now. And if this makes zillions of dollars, I'll come back. But until then, that's totally what I'm doing. So this one is a little bit tighter plot, but there's still I still prefer the. Let's kind of see where this goes. Like, I got this big gap at the beginning where it's like, I don't know where this is going to go yet. I know where it ends up, but I don't know. Let's go.
Yeah, I want to kind of like that. Like, I know I have the world built. I have the characters in my head. And so when I get down to start it, I'll probably write the beginning 5K, I don't know, 5 or 6 times, because that's the way I am. That's how I get into it. Even if it's a short story. And then after each writing session, I always put notes. This is where I'm intending to go. So it's kind of, it's pantsing, but it's pantsing with notes.
Well, no. Again, you sound like you're like me in the sense where you have an ending in mind. You kind of know. No, you don't.
No, I normally don't have my endings in mind. Really?
Yeah.
No, because I find if I get an ending in mind, I work too hard for that ending to happen.
Oh, okay.
And then things just fall apart. My story in A Dark Fantastique was my first pro sale. And the story that shows up in it, the ending is much different than the actual ending that I've had. And Gord Rollo and Gene O'Neill are my beta readers for that one, and they both said in the last 2 pages, we can tell that you had this ending in mind in the beginning. The writing's really stiff. This ending doesn't work to what you've done. Redo it. So I redid it, and then it sold right away.
I know. So I guess it's just finding that right balance, being open-minded. Okay, let's see where this goes. So do you have a beginning in mind usually?
I usually have a couple sentences in mind. Like with Wild Woman, I had the first sentence in mind, and then I just built it from there.
Okay, so that's actually that's super impressive, because this is what I have found personally. It's really hard to finish stuff without that kind of that's you have no idea how actually impressive that actually is.
Oh
no, because most the reason why a lot of this plot and plan, because the biggest thing is we have to work towards something, so we see it even though it might go completely out the window, right? You have a plan, you're working towards something. You don't even have that, and you finish stuff. That's awesome.
Well, I have a loose idea, but I don't plot it out anymore because it gets too.
But that's. I'm giving you stuff.
No.
It's super impressive. No, you really have no idea, because I thought I couldn't do it unless I
could do it.
Yeah.
Even when I was a pantser, I had a beginning, middle, and end.
Yeah, exactly. That's. I'm serious. That's really rare. For a writer, that's exceptionally rare. Right? So, yeah.
Maybe that's why I don't produce as much. No, I know for me it's time.
Well, no, and that is a huge, that's a legit huge struggle. Money versus time. I mean, we all go through it. So I have a day job. He has a day job, right?
Bills versus writing is really what it is. For me, anyways.
I'm at the point where my bills are almost completely under control. It's now do I want nice things or do I need to write? That's kind of where I'm at this point. And I'm working towards my own goal right now is I'm getting ready for when we're the fall, and it's when I'm going to start doing my whatever push I'm going to do for my current stuff, and then next. We'll see where I get to with 3 and 4. So that's my master plan for it. But so I'm going to be working a little more and taking less. So basically, I'm just basically saying it's a never ending.
Yeah, when you just throw a couple kids on top of that,
so you have 2 full-time jobs already.
Yes.
So okay.
Well, 1.5, because my son's graduated now. He's off at university, so
that's awesome.
So I just have my daughter left.
I'm almost afraid to ask how old you are, because I can't picture you at all, and you might punch me, and that might hurt.
What do I say? I'm 29 for the 12th time.
Sweet. Awesome. All right. So, hold on a second here. Doing a quick
Yeah, I know. I got to do the same thing.
All right. Okay. So I'll talk to you for a little bit. I'll talk to him, and then we'll close it out that way. And this is the only part I'm probably going to edit out in the whole conversation, actually. It's a good conversation by and large.
Oh,
So, no, it's super impressive. So, you know where your novel, you have your idea where your novel's going. Is there any other like forms of like literature, like comics? You said you were on stage, like movie kind of stuff. Would you do that kind of thing, or
well, I did theater, and
or even plays, right? In that case,
see, it's a time thing
Yeah.
because it's sort of one or the other.
yeah.
Theater is a full-time commitment. I didn't finish pursuing it because I don't have the physiology for it. I get migraines because you'd be there on the stage, on those lights when it came close to opening night, just standing there so that they could block the lighting cues, so that they could hear how it sounded. Maybe we had to change some blocking, and you're standing there for 9-10 hours. And it would give me migraines just standing like that. So.
Well, no, because it's extra rehearsal, and it's not like pressure in the sense that you're actually doing anything. It's pressure that you're doing nothing, and you're like,
Yeah, well, not just that. It was just between going to school and then, going to the rehearsals, and it was too much for...
You never sleep.
Exactly. I don't sleep nowadays anyways. But back then, just standing there would give me migraines. So I didn't finish pursuing theater.
That's fair enough. I'll let you do what you gotta do, and then I'll ask him the same question, a different thing. So you do novels. I'm sure you've done shorts. Would you do other like literature things, like comics and movies and movie scripts or television? Or is that something that interests you at all? Or
Any activity I have to do that involves other people, I tend to shy away from unless there's money on the table.
yeah, no, it's
Yeah,
a good point.
but I am collaborating with some other authors. One of the things.
Are you guys still doing okay?
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you. But I am doing some collaboration with other authors. I used to do exclusively novels, and I didn't really do short stories because I consider them a distraction. I had a job that took up 150% of my time, and then I had kids, and so I had to focus my time where I could get the best bang, and that was in novels because nobody's going to run out and buy your short story at the bookstore.
No.
So you really had to. With my generation, it was all about you write short stories to build up some cred, and then you get an agent. The agent sees how well you've done, and so it was kind of a screening process for the industry. It was one of the gatekeepers. You got some short story published, then you got that was good. You use leverage those credits to get an agent, and then you leverage the agent to get into a major house and get a big book published with a big publisher. These days, that's changed. So short stories for me, I considered them a distraction back then, even though I knew I should do them, and I still do consider them a distraction. But I am now being more attracted to shorter forms like novellas. I'm finding that when I'm doing a lot more self-publishing these days, and as I do, and I love the control over the product, I can put out a top-notch product that looks like it's from a Big Five publisher, and control the price. I can get it into the market, not a year from now, but a couple months from now. Yeah. And it's just fantastic. But one of the things I found was that when you're self-publishing, you're kind of trapped in this $3 price point. So with that $3 price point, why are you giving people 150,000 word novels or 100,000 word novels? I think it's time to bring back the dime novel.
I actually agree with
So
that.
if you're going to pay me $3, I will give you 40,000 words. I should at least get $1 per day, roughly 10,000 words.
Do you know what? Like just on a personal note, like I look at the phone, like where I'm talking to you right now, and I see this so much potential. There are people that make a living just sending out like a few thousand words at a time on a weekly or monthly basis. Content right now is in more demand than it ever was. It's just there's such a glut.
It's crowded.
Yeah, it's crowded, right?
So it's harder to stand out.
Yeah, it's harder to stand out. But the thing is, I look at the phone and I'm thinking, well, this is the real medium for like today and tomorrow. It's not television. I love books, but I mean, it's not books, it's not comics, it's not graphic novels, it's not movies, none of that crap. It's the phone, right? Mm-hmm. So I think like, especially I look at what you're doing. Like, you're a short fiction writer. Like you, of the three of us, you're the one that does the short thing. You like what you could do in theory to create a fan base. You could do like a newsletter because you already do short stories anyway, and you have a content like every week you release a few thousand words here, a few thousand words there, and you build a following, and then you go, I got this big product, and maybe you do a collection, or maybe you do maybe something bigger, like a bigger project. But now you have a fan base that's following you. Does that make sense?
Yep, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Isn't that what Wattpad's all about?
Kind of, but Wattpad. Problem with Wattpad is it's a platform, and because it's a platform, everybody's on it. What I think the real secret to today is it's not about being part of a platform outside of social medias like Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, whatever. I think it's more about, okay, you got a newsletter. So you want to try to attract people to, say, that newsletter. I'm just giving an example. It doesn't even have to be a newsletter, but newsletter, Patreon, whatever. So now what you're trying to do is you're trying to create your own little niche, like Craig Dilouie, Chris Marr, right? Let me just do like a dynamic duo, like publishing and whatever. It doesn't really matter, right? But the point is you're trying to create your niche. You want to highlight your niche. The platform is almost irrelevant. It's the niche you're trying to create, the experience you're trying to create. Like with a Craig Dilouie book, I'm only going to get horror, that will make me think and question things that I never would have considered, right? Or I'm going to get a very fun, entertaining romp if it's fantasy or something. Like that's a Craig Dilouie experience.
Yeah.
Chris Marr, I'm going to get an apocalyptic story, but that's not a good or bad thing. But I'm going to have to come out feeling optimistic that things will get better, right? That's your product. That's who you are. That's who you are. So I think about this stuff too, like just where we're going, and what I'd like I look at stuff like Kickstarter, I look at stuff like Patreon. I'm like, I think that's more where things are going. It's not going to be about big giant things anymore. It's going to be about, you get 1,000 fans, but those 1,000 fans all pay you money. If you're good with that, you buy your groceries, pay your bills, same thing. I think that's where it's going to go. That's just maybe that's me. So.
Well, it's either going to go in that direction or it's just going to like collapse. Because already people with Kickstarter and Indiegogo's, you see it and you can almost hear them groaning. Not another one.
well, no. But okay, the thing about Kickstarter. This is the thing about Kickstarter. If what kills something like that is when you don't deliver. I bid on something 2 years ago. I know the guy. He's a good guy. I am never seeing that product. So that money I spent could have gone to you, or somebody I know that can deliver.
Yeah.
Right? So what's going to end up happening, or I look at people that are just Kickstarter mainstays like Travis Hansen, who always deliver quality work, and so whenever they do a Kickstarter, that's their publisher essentially, and they make a living doing it. Right?
Well, we did a Kickstarter. Was involved in an anthology project called Deep Cuts. It was to honor women in horror, but it was open to men and women to submit. And this was 2012 that we did the Kickstarter. So that was at the beginning of Kickstarter.
Yes.
And we succeeded. But we were lucky because it was at the beginning of Kickstarter, and now there's a lot of that sort of thing.
It goes back to the same thing. It's the platform is everybody uses a platform to get successful. It's finding your niche in said platform. Yeah, that's kind of where we're at. So let's see. We've talked about quite a bit here, and we've gone to about 45 minutes. So I think we got a decent conversation. We got you involved, which is the important thing. And no, dude, actually, I really, like I said, I wish I might pick up at least a couple of your stuff, because both the children book and the Alchemist both sound amazing. Like they're really, really good, and I definitely will check them out another time. Right. So we're gonna do the shameless style plugs. What are you guys currently doing, and how can people find you on social media? Me? Okay.
Yeah.
The Alchemist just came out. It's a fantasy novel that's available in paperback through Amazon. In ebook, it's only available through Tapas Media right now, which is their phone app, for the next 3 months, and then it'll be available for Kindle. I recently published the second episode of my Crash Dive series, which is a submarine thriller series set in World War II. Think Horatio Hornblower on submarines. I've got a
Awesome.
horror poetry collection coming out within the next 2 months. And I just finished a novel that I'm going to either be self-publishing or trying to get an agent for, new agent.
Very nice. So how can they find you online if they're going to find you?
You can find me at CraigDilouie.com. So that's Craig, C-R-A-I-G, Dilouie, D-I-Louie, L-O-U-I-E.com. And pretty much everything's there. How to get me on Facebook, Amazon, Twitter, and so on.
Let's see. Well, my Journals Don't Double Down with Jean O'Neill. It's available on Amazon as a trade paperback or an ebook. And you can find me on Facebook at Chris Mars.
Okay.
M-A-R-R-S, right?
Yes.
All right.
M-A-R-R-S.
And that will do it. Oh, it was fun. I enjoyed Chris and Craig very much. Thanks, guys. I was really appreciative. And that's another episode. We got kind of long, so I'm going to wrap this up really, really short. Well, I went kind of long. They were just fine. Anyways, next week, Michael Plisted. We're going to be talking about Boy Scouts and the apocalypse and all that other wonderful fun stuff. And, you can continue on the literary road. Beyond that, I hopefully have more good news to talk about next week. But until then, guys, you stay inspired. Don't do anything I wouldn't do. Well, whatever that is. And have yourself a good weekend. See you next week.
Josh.